We ready?
Do a 10-second countdown and we can go ahead and go. Thank you so much.
So welcome to our second Children's Commission meeting of the year. And I'd like to start out by really telling everybody how concerned we are about those of you from Houston. I know that you had a really serious storm yesterday afternoon, and our thoughts and prayers are with you. And I certainly hope that everything will work out for all of you and your families. And those of you who don't have power, I'm really, really sorry about that. So just know that we're all thinking about all of you and hope that you'll be able to get things together pretty soon. And thank you. I want to thank those of you from Houston who actually are on the Zoom today. That's obviously going above and beyond when you had a lot more serious things to be thinking about this morning. So thank you for your conscientiousness and being here today. And we certainly understand that anyone who couldn't be here, because obviously those things take priority. So I just want to start out by, again, thanking everybody for all the work that you all do in this important area. Justice Huddle and I are really so appreciative, and the entire court. I think you all know that there's no cases that we take more seriously than these cases involving these families. So thank you for what you do to make the lives of these children better. It's really important. And we want you to continue to please give us ideas about what you want us to cover, what you think. You're the people in the field. You are the ones seeing what's going on. And while Justice Huddle and me in the court, we see things, of course, from a cold appellate record. You are on the ground seeing live what's really going on. So please, and know how much we appreciate all of you, everyone, all the different professionals, all the trial judges who are hearing these cases, the attorneys, CASA, everybody. The department, y'all do wonderful things, and thank you. And again, please let us know what we need to do to make things better for these families. I just have a few housekeeping measures that I would like to go over. So today, because of the virtual format, the meeting is going to end no later than 11:30. And we won't be taking any breaks. But of course, if you need to excuse yourself, that's perfectly fine. But we're going to try to get through at 11:30. One thing about this remote virtual format, although it's so much nicer for us to be in person, it is nice to be able to do these things remotely sometimes, because it saves, of course, everybody the issues involved. Is it just now starting? Oh, well, the issues involved in getting to a certain location, usually Austin, of course. But, so it serves a good purpose. But I think we'll all look forward to our next meeting when we can be in person again and enjoy each other's company. Please remain muted unless you're speaking, because, sometimes there's outside noise that we hear and it just can be a little bit disruptive. Committee and collaborative council members are participating in listen-only mode. And we're broadcasting this meeting, as we said a moment ago, live on YouTube. And if you have any questions or answers, that function is available for you. So please feel free to use that. And thank you for participating again on so many levels for so many reasons. When I say we, I'm speaking for Justice Huddle and the court, that we really appreciate what you all do. And now I want to introduce my wonderful colleague, the wonderful, brilliant, and very dedicated, because she's here after a huge storm last night with 2 kids in the house, Justice Rebecca Huddle.
Good morning. Thank you, Justice Lehrman. Good morning, everyone. We're very happy to see people, bright, shining faces this morning. Thank you for spending Friday morning with us. It's heartwarming, especially after sudden and unexpected, challenge last night. to see everyone come together for this really good and important purpose of strengthening our child welfare system. Hopefully today will be a nice change in format. I hope that despite this format, which has pros and cons, one of the pros is you don't have to travel anywhere to get to the meeting. One of the cons is sometimes you lose a little bit of the quality of the discussion. I really want to challenge us as we get started to really feel like we're in the same space together and really bring everything we have to the discussion today, which I hope will be robust and really focused on sort of ideas and brainstorming ideas and plans for the future. So a couple of logistical matters. I want to switch gears to talk about membership changes, just a couple here. If you look at tab 1 of your meeting notebook, that's PDF page 9, if you're following that way. This shows us the commission, committee, and collaborative council membership, as well as staff. So that's just a reminder that you have all of those names in one place. There are a couple of membership changes I want to highlight. One is Adriana Cuellar Rojas joined the Systems Improvement Committee. She assumed the role of CEO at Tex Protects in September. And so we want to give you a warm welcome and thank you in advance for participating in this committee's important work. I don't see whether you are on this morning's call, but if you are, welcome, and maybe just give us a wave. Chelsea Cornelius joined the Data Committee. She joined Texans Care for Children as the Director of Research and Evaluation, also last year in 2023. And we're lucky to have her as a member of the Data Committee. So welcome to Ms. Cornelius, and I hope you will join me in welcoming both of these new members, Adriana and Chelsea. I know that all of us will look forward to your contributions. I have a couple of guests I want to bring your attention to. One is Kathy Krebs, the Committee Director of the ABA, the American Bar Association Children's Rights Litigation Committee. Kathy is with us today as a guest, so welcome to Kathy. I hope you enjoy today's meeting and all of the sort of invigorating exchange that this group, that marks this group is a really special one. Kathy is joined by Collaborative Council member and Texas Appleseed Deputy Director, Gabriella McDonald. So welcome to both of you. We're glad to have you with us today. Do you want to take a moment, either of you, Kathy or Gabriella, to share a bit about the ABA Litigation Committee's work that's going on in Austin?
We would love to, Justice Huddle. Kathy, you want to go ahead and introduce?
Yes, thank you all so much for having us. We are so excited to be here. As Justice Huddle said, I am Kathy Krebs. I am the Director of the Children's Rights Litigation Committee, which is part of the American Bar Association litigation section. We are hosting our spring meeting here in Austin, which is why we're in town. The mission of our committee is to address the underrepresentation of children in all aspects of the legal system. And so our focus is really on ensuring that children and youth have lawyers when they need them, and that those lawyers are good lawyers, right? That they're quality counsel. I have the privilege of being the staff person for that committee, and then our work is really volunteer-led. So Gabriella, who you all know well, is one of my co-chairs, and we are fortunate to have children's lawyers from around the country who lead our work. One of the really fun and unique things about our committee is that we work cross-sector. So we have expertise on issues ranging from education to youth homelessness to immigration, juvenile justice, child welfare, and we're really able to work across sectors and with children's lawyers who work in all of those different areas and focus on different projects. I think Gabriella's going to talk a little bit about some of the projects that we're working on right now.
Yeah, just very quickly. One of the things that we're working on is strip search prevention in all aspects. So just especially in the education sector, And so there's a webinar that's available through our website on the Children's Rights Litigation Committee, where you can check out the webinar and some of the toolkit that accompanies that. And in addition to that, we're really thinking deeply, like the legal representation subcommittee of this commission, about workforce issues and making sure that there are more children's lawyers and that more students, both in the undergraduate and in the law school sector, are thinking about being children's lawyers and that as a possible career path, because it's not always something that may be on somebody's mind who's going to law school and doesn't necessarily know what type of law they want to practice. And so we want to put forth our resources and efforts to think about expanding our workforce so that there are more lawyers available for children and families. And then one of the other big things we're doing, which is what we're doing here in Austin today, is operating as a convener and a place to think about collaboration and bring people together. And we've had the advantage of going to New Mexico and Mississippi and Alabama and a number of other places where lawyers from different sectors who are often serving the same kids don't always talk to each other. And it's a great opportunity to really get lawyers from the child welfare space and the juvenile justice space and the education space and the immigration space talking together about the issues that they're seeing and ways they can better serve the populations that there are often overlapping. And we've had the great advantage of doing that in a number of different places. And now we're here in Austin doing that today. I'm really glad to be able to do that. Kathy, anything else I missed?
I think that's it. We, as Gabriella said, we really love to collaborate. I was really excited to talk to Jamie to learn more about the commission. I've known about your work. You all do really good work. And it's something that we pay attention to. And, we have a website that we put together focused on workforce issues. And we have links to some of the videos that you all have done, really lifting up what it means to be a children's lawyer and videos where people are able to talk about children's law as a career path. So we're grateful for the work you all are doing. We're always excited to collaborate. So excited to be here and learn more about your work as well.
And thank you for having us, Justice Lehrman and Justice Huddle and Jamie and the rest of the staff.
Well, thank you very much. And I don't know if you remember, Kathy, but we've known each other for many years. I was very involved in the ABA, still am, and I was a prior chair of the family law section. And so our paths have crossed. So for all of you who don't know, Kathy has been very, very involved in these issues for, 30 years. I mean, I've known you that long, I think, a long time.
I think that's right. It doesn't seem that long, Justin. We're too young, I think, but.
Well, we started when we were 2, right?
That's right. That's right.
And it's, so thank you both very much for your work. We really appreciate it. And it's good for us to be able to collaborate. The commission, we really are very proud of the work that we do. And we really are focused on doing the best we can to make sure that our judiciary has the tools it needs to help these families. So thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Let's do a little bit of housekeeping. We need to adopt the minutes, please, from our February 2nd meeting. So they were distributed earlier. They're at tab 2. That's page 13 in the PDF in the meeting notebook. So I hope that everybody's had an opportunity to look through that and to review the minutes. So does anybody have any corrections or any modifications? Okay, I don't see any. So is there a motion to adopt the minutes from the February meeting?
So moved.
Okay, all in favor? Oh, is there a second? We need a second.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the minutes are adopted. Okay, so now we are going to hear from our wonderful leader, Miss Jamie Bernstein.
Hello, everybody. I'm absolutely so encouraged to see so much engagement on the screen today and to have you all here with us, especially given all the weather in the state and everything people may be going through personally. So it's just an honor to be here with you all today and present the commission report. And I'm, of course, backed up by an incredible staff who's going to share with you the projects for the coming year. And I just want to share that this meeting marks my 10-year anniversary at the Children's Commission. And I have to say, we have done so much great work before my time and in the decade that I've been here. It's an absolute honor and a privilege to be here and to see this work continue to grow, to see the investment from the judiciary and the engagement across all branches of government. It's just a privilege to be here. So this is the time of the year where we brainstorm and develop our plans for the coming fiscal year. And we're really excited to share those ideas with you today. There are a lot of longstanding projects. Some of them may be your favorite, your pet projects. We're not going to talk about all of that today. If you want updates on the slate that we've been working on in fiscal year 24, that's in the commission report, which is behind tab 3 in your notebooks. You can reference that at your leisure. But we're really going to focus on proposed changes and new projects that have been generated through our standing committees. And after each committee report, we have 4 of them, we'll pause for question and answer and discussion. And there's also a Q&A feature for those who want to submit feedback in that way. And I just want to underscore, as Justice Huddle said, that your feedback is invaluable to us. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you think about how we use our finite time and resources. And we only have so much capacity, so we're going to synthesize what we talk about today, take it to the staff, and try to propose a slate and bring it back to you in September at the commission meeting, where you'll vote on our FY25 budget and slate of activities. So I also wanted to share that just as kind of a placeholder, we know we will probably have some strategies that come about as a result of the Federal Child and Family Services Review and the program improvement process. So we will probably have a placeholder in our strategic plan for that. We need to work with the department to develop those collaboratively. But with that, I will turn it over to Amy to give our systems improvement report.
Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to kind of launch into our kind of future plans. Some we are still developing, and then that's where we would love to have your feedback. So first is kind of our prevention area. You've heard a lot about the Texas Family First pilot, which is the court oversight of evidence-based family preservations pilot. This upcoming year, DFPS and the Children's Commission contracted to conduct regional trainings in the pilot sites. And so we will actually have our 3 West, which is the Fort Worth area, on June 3rd. Region 1 will be in July, and August will be Region 2. So the plan is to do these regional trainings on TFF. And while we're there, we thought, hey, what's another very important topic to talk about? Reasonable efforts. So this is kind of our TFF/reasonable efforts regional trainings. So the areas that don't have TFF will be getting to do a 4-hour in-depth reasonable efforts trainings. It'll be hands-on, it'll have some great scenarios, and we're going to invite not only, DFPS leadership, but attorneys, judges, child welfare professionals. And this great partnership between the commission and DFPS is really going to be a great place for us to clear up any kind of misconceptions and really ensure that everyone receives the same information. So we did kind of a little trial in 8B, which is the kind of donut around San Antonio. We received really great feedback. And so we're looking forward to this next year, going into each region and really kind of giving them a deeper dive into some, what can be a very confusing area of the law.
Amy, could you explain which region, what you're talking about? Because a lot of people, I don't know where you're talking about.
No worries. I'm so sorry. Yes. So June 3rd will be the 3 West is the Fort Worth area. And July, Region 1 is Lubbock. So that'll be up towards the Panhandle. August, Region 2, we will most likely be in Amarillo. So that's kind of the area next door to Region 1. So, and then we'll hit all of the other areas of the state throughout the rest of the year. So we're excited to cover areas that, like you kind of mentioned, Justice Lerman, have to normally travel very far to come to commission things. So we're glad to bring this to them in their backyard.
Wonderful.
Our next topic that we kind of want to explore originated from the Systems Improvement Committee. And this committee met at the very end of April. And one of the topics that they brought up that they'd kind of like the commission to take into consideration is related to runaways. So some committee members reported concerns of runaways being children without placement, issues related to CPS possibly dismissing a case when a child is on run, how the schools, McKinney-Vento services for homeless youth, how those can be better utilized, and concerns related to, of course, when you have a child on run, commercial sexual exploitation and trafficking. So runaways is an area that we would kind of like your thoughts about how to kind of better explore ways that we could address and look at that population. Another area that the SI committee kind of brought to our attention that we may want to work on is really reinvigorating the presence of youth in court. We heard concerns that youth participation in court proceedings have really decreased over the years. Youth voice is so important to not only knowing how they're currently doing, but also to help them feel part of their future planning. So we would like to explore some ways to help motivate not only youth, but also judges in increasing that engagement in their court experience. One other area that has caused increasing discussion in the judicial community that we've heard from is, of course, community-based care expansion. So as of now, over 50% of the state is transitioning to the CBC. So through a lot of trial and error in the areas that have gone first, our judges have learned many lessons that could actually help the up and coming judges in these transitioning areas. Likewise, the judges may be encountering new issues and new challenges that they want to discuss in a safe space. So the commission is exploring the idea of a CBC judicial work group where judges can focus on the legal aspects of community-based care in a supportive, safe environment. And then lastly, for the systems improvement topic, before we open it up, the Children's Commission held a roundtable examining the Forensic Assessment Center Network, also called the FACN, a few years ago. So the FACN is a network of pediatric child abuse specialists who examine complex medical cases. And there's been a lot of legislature the past few sessions placing additional requirements on FACN and DFPS. And this roundtable generated some recommendations for creating a resource for parents to really help them navigate this process, knowing who the parties are, who's who. So this next year, we'd like to create a work group that would really dive into this deliverable and offer guidance to parents with cases who do involve the FACN. So now I kind of want to open it up to questions. The commission is really hearing this increase and ongoing concerns related to older youth, which do include the runaways and their voice and presence in court. And so we would like to kind of hear from you, what are some ways that we can address the needs of the runaways and increase the attendance and engagement of the older youth and all youth in court?
Question just for a follow-up would be, do we have data related to some of the questions you're asking? I'm thinking about the runaway youth in particular, and what do we already know about that? Has there been any surveys or deeper dives into some of the potential, both the case study kind of approach or, a various information? I'm just kind of curious of where we stand with that.
That's a great question, Dr. Plow. I don't know. Judge Hoffman may have the answer to that. Yes, sir.
Go ahead. I'll wait. I'll go after you.
And so that I can look into. So I think that's a great launching point, which is to find out what data is out there. What can we gather? What can we find out about not only the population? Are there any trends? So I think that's a great launching point into kind of exploring that further. Thank you, Dr. Blau.
Yeah, I'll just jump in and say, I know DFPS does an annual runaway report, and they are capturing a lot of data related to CWAP and how many have runaway episodes. So I think there is some data to pull from.
Yeah, I was just going to drill down a little bit further and say there was a concern that I think was confirmed statewide on our committee that we have some older children in long-term foster care that are on runaway status, and we've been seeing a trend of the department seeking to non-suit out of the cases. And so that was one specific issue that I think we need to address for those around the state.
Judge.
Thank you. So, I mean, as a starting place, I think, drilling down and getting that type of information, perhaps, I don't know if there's funds to, to do a contracting, for somebody to take a look at those things, or somebody from the FPS that might be able to, but really put it together and then start looking at what are those specific theme areas that we might want to address, and what could be, strategies both within the child welfare and also beyond, some of the potential connections to other child serving systems as well, because as Judge Hoffman is saying, that it extends into other areas. So anyway, just to be a thought for the next step.
Great, thank you.
I think part of it, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
I think part of the issue that I'm seeing with the runaways is a lot of these children are trending with a lot of behavioral issues. And the placement options that we have as far as a resource to put them to have those behavioral issues addressed, there's very, very limited options. And some of these children have very specific needs that perhaps there's a placement out there that may address psychological needs, but it doesn't necessarily address specific needs as to what that child has been experiencing. For instance, like sex trafficking, and so I think the biggest problem that I have been running into is the limited resources that are available for these behavioral issues. So then what happens is the children end up in CWOP, and then frankly, they're bored out of their mind. And because of their behavioral issues, they're not participating in school or things of that nature. And so if they're bored in the hotels where they're being housed, or whatever the CWOP facility is that they're being housed in, then they're going to abscond from there. And so it's very cyclical. And really the resources that we don't have a lot of resources for rehabilitation with respect to behavioral issues, life skills training, to keep their minds active. And so we need to have more dialogue on that, as well as action to bringing those facilities to the regions that need it.
Thank you, Judge Alvarado. That's insightful.
Amy, if I could just say very quickly, I just want to confirm that DFPS does have a wealth of information available on children and youth who are on runaway status. We refer to those children as being on missing status, because until a child comes back from a runaway status, in some circumstances, we don't know for sure if they have run away or if something else might have happened to them. For example, we have young children who from rare time to rare time might be taken by a parent, a biological parent, for example, or something like that. So we refer to it as missing, but we do have a wealth of data that we track on that, and we are more than happy to help with any analysis of that data to dig into those issues.
Thank you, Audrey. I appreciate that.
Amy, if I could add to that, I just want to recognize the work that Audrey and the department have done in terms of reducing the number of children without placement. There's been a dramatic decline, and I know the intensity of the work round the clock to make sure have placements children do. I believe maybe I visited with Jennifer Sims this week. I think they're down to 15 children statewide, which is remarkable given the high acuity needs of children who traditionally have not had licensed placement. So I just have to give so much credit to the department, Audrey, your entire team, in making that happen.
Thank you so much, Anne. I'm gonna share some data later in the DFPS update about that, but I still very much appreciate it.
Never mind.
Thank you both. Well, thank you so much. I don't want to take all of the time. These have given me some great starting points and some great kind of areas to look into and take back to our commission discussion. So I will now pass it on to Dylan.
Thank you, Amy, for that great update. So I wanted to update everyone on our projects that fall under the Legal Process and Practice Committee, and I will be updating for both myself and Renee Castillo de la Cruz, who can't be here today. She's worked very hard on many of these projects. The first area that I wanted to update people on was the project under our Legal Representation Committee. The Legal Representation Committee has been focused on trying to brainstorm ideas that deal with the capacity issue that many judges have reported to us about attorneys who are willing to take child welfare cases. Many judges have reported to us a decrease in the number of attorneys on their appointment list to represent parents and children. So one of the ways we've been trying to address this issue is to increase awareness of child welfare law as a career path. And one of the ideas that the committee generated was to try to increase exposure to child welfare law as a field early on for young people who may be interested in pursuing law as a career. So we have reached out to several law school, undergraduate, and high school organizations about creating a child welfare law mock trial or moot court fact pattern to get people aware that this is a field of law that exists at a much earlier stage than they might otherwise be aware of that. We've met with Melissa Garcia, who's the director of the Texas High School Mock Trial and Related Education Association, to discuss creating a child welfare law fact pattern. They've been very receptive to that, and they're going to propose that idea at the board's meeting in June. But if any other commission member has other connections to other moot or mock trial organizations, we'd like to try to get as broad an impact as we can. So we really encourage everyone to think about how we might be able to broaden that perspective. The other major legal representation update that I wanted to share is that our last committee meeting in May, we talked about what project the committee really wanted to focus on for FY 2025. And the consensus by far was to try to support pre-petition representation. That was a very broad consensus. There are some pre-petition projects in Texas. There was the McLennan project that concluded last year. The Texas Rio Grande Legal Association has an ongoing project, but they're very small in number. And so while there's a lot of consensus on the issue that needed to be addressed, there was much less consensus on exactly what we can or should do to try to support those efforts. So our next meeting of the committee is going to be in August, and the focus of that meeting is going to be on trying to refine and come up with some specific ideas and projects that committee can do to support and establish a pre-petition representation. So the next area that I wanted to update everyone on is our Parent Resources Work Group. This is our work group that's dedicated to helping parents understand the issues that they confront in child welfare. And there are two major resources that the committee is working on and hope to complete as deliverables in FY 2025. The first is our pre-litigation guide. So this is our guide that's modeled on our current parent resource guide that helps parents understand the issues when their child is removed from their care and they're in a temporary managing conservatorship case. We are trying to model a similar guide to help parents understand the investigative stage of a case, because there are many more parents who experience the investigative stage of a case than experience the conservatorship stage of a case. So this resource is modeled on that resource, but it's at a very different stage. We have been working on it throughout FY 2024. The work group has continuing to work on that, where I think we're getting closer and closer to a final product, and we hope to have that ready in FY 2025. The other major project that the Parent Materials Work Group hopes to have completed in 2025 is focusing on creating parent voice videos. So these are videos modeled on the videos that were created for youth to help them understand the attorney-client relationship. We are going to create a similar series of videos for parents. We had a successful focus group where parents were able to give their feedback as to what they thought would be valuable in helping to understand the attorney-client relationship and related issues. And we're hoping to divide that into about 4 or 5 different videos focused on those topics that they identified. The idea will be that parents themselves would be able to participate in these videos and give their own perspective about these issues, accompanied by attorneys who can help explain the specific law around these issues. So that project it's moving forward, and we're hoping to complete it in FY 2025. The next area that falls under LLP is our efforts to support mediation. The mediation work group had been working on a mediation toolkit, but that idea seemed to, after a lot of revising, it seemed to not be the appropriate, I think, major project for the work group to work on. So we've tried to sort of regroup and think of sort of smaller ideas that are more feasible. There's a lot of smaller, instead of a larger toolkit, sort of worksheets that we hope to complete prior to FY 2025. And for FY 2025, the work group is really focused on creating CLEs that help both attorneys and mediators understand the process of mediation to make it as successful as it possibly can. And two of those topics that were identified for legal education were participation by non-parties to mediation and how to work that and how to make that successful, as well as participation by incarcerated parents. So those are sort of two specific topics that the mediation work group hopes to develop CLEs around in FY 2025. The next area of focus that I wanted to update everyone on for LLP is our Legislation and Policy Resource Committee. This is our newly named committee, and I'm trying to make sure I get that exactly right. So this is our committee that we've developed to try to make sure we have a more broad judicial engagement with the legislative process and addition to the sort of a responsive nature to the legislative process. So we've had several meetings of that group already to try to identify areas of focus that they would like to prioritize for submitting proposals to the Texas Judicial Council, which will put forward a legislative slate in September. So we've had 2 meetings of that work group. They've identified some areas that they would like to focus on. Our next meeting will be in June to try to refine and prioritize those ideas that were developed and then submit them over the course of the summer to the appropriate subcommittees from the Texas Judicial Council to have them ready to be voted on by the full council in September. In addition to that, we are trying to think about how that committee is going to function once the legislative session starts. And it's daunting to me to think that that new legislative session is just around the corner, but it is going to happen. It is going to be coming soon, but we're trying to be as proactive as we can to think about how we can be responsive during the legislative session and involve this broader work group. So we are really interested in any feedback or questions that anyone has about any of the projects that I just talked about. But specifically, I think I would love to hear ideas from the commissioners about sort of those 2 major projects under the Legal Representation Committee that we talked about. What can we do to help attorney recruitment and outreach to address the attorney capacity issue? And how might we be able to support pre-petition representation? So I'm happy to answer any questions, and I would love to hear any ideas that anyone has regarding those 2 specific issues.
Dylan, I would just comment that the Texas Indigent Defense Council has formed a work group to examine and possibly propose some legislative language on preventative legal advocacy, and they'll be meeting soon. And I think that the commission is already included in that group, and I think for us to plug into that would be a big boost for any efforts towards promoting the preventative legal advocacy.
Thank you for pointing that out, Judge H. Yes, that I'm excited for that first meeting of that work group, and I'm really pleased that there are several members of the Legal Representation Committee who've really put a lot of thought into these issues. Will also be on that work group as well. So I'm really pleased with that. I think there's a lot of potential there, and I know specifically that as part of the authority that TIDC was granted in the last legislative session, it did specifically include pre-petition representation. So that was a really, I think, good sort of proactive, thoughtful move when that legislation was created to make sure that it included thinking about access to pre-petition representation as well.
Dylan, one other thing, since we're talking about TIDC, TIDC did the first of 2 outreaches to law schools, indicating trying to talk to the law students before graduation about the possibility of practicing law in this area. We went to Texas Tech and Baylor. We had some good discussion with both student bodies. It is a developing program, but I think TIDC should get some credit for doing that, and I think the commission should work with TIDC on that going forward, because I think that's the best chance we have to have an immediate effect about recruiting some younger and more numerous lawyers into the field, is getting them at the law school stage.
Thank you, Mark. I really appreciate you sharing that, because I know you were at the Baylor event, or you were at the Lubbock event as well?
Both.
You were at both. So what was that experience like? Like, how did you feel that it went?
Well, we had Well, at the Texas Tech function, there was over 30 young people there, young students there. Most of them were 2Ls and 3Ls. I was surprised at the number of them who had some type of exposure to the child welfare arena before we got there. Some of them had been social workers. That was true at Baylor as well. There were some people that had worked as social workers or had worked in a law office that was tied to child welfare law practice. And so there was some pre-exposure. And that's good and that's bad. I think it's good that they were there and they're interested. It's bad that a significant portion of the people who attended had already been exposed to child welfare law. So we need to get people that may not necessarily have been exposed to that before. The discussion was good. They had lots of questions. They, wanted to see how that fit in with what they were doing. There's a little different though. There is no child welfare law class at Texas Tech. And so there was no direct way for them to learn about that area. Baylor does have a class that includes child welfare law, but is not child welfare law specific. And so I think one of the things that we probably need to do is talk to some of the family law chairs at the various law schools about including some kind of child welfare class, even if it's taught by an adjunct professor, but to at least allow some sort of exposure to that area, to students who may be interested in that area of law.
Thank you, Mark. And I just want to share just a little bit more information about some of the things Mark talked about. TIDC has established what they call their public defender days at law schools, in which they talk about that as a career path. And we really tried to work with them to include child welfare law as part of those public defender days, that's an equally important part of public defense. And they've been very receptive to it. We've collaborated them to recruit appropriate speakers for judges and attorneys in the local areas, particularly alumni of the law schools, to be able to speak to students. And Mark, I think you made a fantastic point about child welfare courses at law schools. And that's another area that was identified by the LRC. We have been working on that. We've reached out to some of the law schools to talk about their child welfare courses. I know that I believe UT has one, and I've spoken with the adjunct professor there, Allison Benish, about the course she teaches and trying to help get a syllabus for that. And I'm not sure if she's on the call today, but I also know that Judge Graves Harrington, I believe, teaches a course at Thurgood Marshall. And so we're really trying to get a sense of what resources are out there and how we can help those resources spread to other law schools to make it easy for them to create a course if they want to, and reach out to them about the idea of creating such a course. So that's also sort of high on our priority list.
Dylan, I'm not sure if you can see the Q&A, so I'll just read it out loud. Deshawn's asking if you're doing outreach to the HBCU students who may want to practice child welfare as well.
We haven't done that specifically yet, but that's an excellent idea to reach out to those HBCs, because that's a really important audience to make sure that the legal population reflects the population of children and families in child welfare. So I think if I'm correct, I don't want to speak for TIDC, but I think they are going to target every single law school in Texas. Yes. But they're not able to do every school every year. So they kind of have it on a rotating list of who they're targeting. But yeah, the idea is that we will target every law school, and we'd also love to even see what we can do for undergraduate courses as well. So that these ideas in this field is introduced at an earlier stage, and when we talk about these topics, that this won't be the first time that they're hearing it, in law school or, once they graduate.
Dylan, let me go ahead and confirm that. The plan is to get around to all of the law schools, probably next spring. We should, and I'm not sure I'm going to be involved in that, but I know TIDC's plan is to hit the other law schools, probably likely next spring, I believe is the plan.
Thank you, Mark. Any other questions or thoughts or ideas? Well, if not, I will turn it over to Milbury Rainey to update us on the training committee.
Thanks, Dylan. Good morning, everyone. Glad to see you all. I also, like Dylan, want to acknowledge Renee's support with preparing these remarks and this update for y'all this morning, and also her dedication and great enthusiasm for all things training. The training committee, as you all know, provides child welfare related training to judges and attorneys through 3 main methods. podcasts, webinars, and in-person trainings. And as training ideas come to us, or as we identify training gaps, we do our very best to figure out which training method is the right fit for the content and for the audience. So I said the word podcast. I want to follow up on that. You haven't missed anything. Just a quick note that we've mapped out our process and we're about to start creating content. We'll send out an announcement when we have the first few episodes recorded and available on our website. Our pilot will be an overview of the commission and our goals for the podcast. These will be no more than 30 minutes long, and our goal is to produce one a month. We're going to call them the Children's Commission Conversations. So recently, our training committee met and provided their recommendations for fiscal year 2025 training topics. And some of the suggested trainings that they recommended that we pursue are as follows: mediation issues, normalcy, guardianship issues for youth and care, and more on legislation and legislative updates. So we are going to determine what method we could use to train on these topics and more in fiscal year 2025. Those particular topics will probably lend themselves best to being a webinar, but we could also create some podcast content around them. As far as in-person training, you all have heard a lot about our trial skills training over the years. This is one of our in-person efforts, and it's continuing to evolve. The next trial skills training will be this September, and we have transformed it into a contested hearings pilot. It will include 5 new lectures that Renee is developing with the trial skills faculty, a simulated contested adversary hearing, and a simulated reasonable efforts argument at a termination trial. Once that pilot has concluded, commission staff will use participant and faculty feedback in addition to the post-event survey responses to determine how this training needs to continue to evolve. And then the next iteration will be in the fall of 2025. Additionally, we receive training requests all the time for content that could be best delivered in person. The training team is focusing on the possibility of developing a strategy called Assistance to Local Jurisdictions that's right now listed under our collaboration goal, but that could become a training goal. And one in-person training that we're hoping to develop would focus on PMC court issues. So the 2 main questions that we have for you all today are, if we have limited bandwidth to develop local trainings, how should these be prioritized? Who should be the target audience for trainings that we could go to local jurisdictions and present ourselves, such as the recent 6-hour training that we gave in Williamson County to help attorneys interested in getting on the child welfare docket in Williamson County be qualified to do so. Or we could develop a training and then bring people to the training. So how can we make the best use of these opportunities for developing local trainings? And what top priorities do you all have to suggest to us?
I see we have a quiet bunch today. So I just want to reframe it a little bit and say, historically, we've always hosted statewide trainings and funded travel for people to come to Austin or a central location. So this is very new for us to be able to go out to the jurisdictions and to help them build capacity for their attorneys to practice in this way. We hope that's one method to develop high quality legal representation in Texas and also keep people abreast of cutting edge issues. So we would love your feedback if we're going to embark on this new territory, what you think is the best way to utilize that time and effort. Anybody have any feedback? Mark?
Jamie, I'll tell you that the section of the child protection section had also identified training as an area in underserved areas as something that needed to be addressed. Specifically, we looked at the area in the Valley. I'm not sure that they're underserved, but as an area that could serve some outreach. What we'd sort of identified is sort of the off the I-35 corridor type of designation. Look at the Panhandle, look at the Valley, far west Texas, even from Abilene west is a strange definition, and that's many millions of square miles, but there's not a lot of lawyers out there, which is unusual. if you look at a breakdown, a demographic breakdown, and put a dot where there are members of our section in particular, there is a huge gap in the Valley and in the Panhandle and throughout far West Texas. And so that leads me to believe, I know that child welfare law is being practiced there, but somehow or the other, we're not getting any outreach. So that's an area, and the section would be more than happy to coordinate with the commission in particular in coming up. We have a project where we have identified the areas. I think the idea of getting the minimum CLEs required to qualify as a child's attorney is an absolute requirement for that. So I think that identification is good. But I do think we need to look at underserved areas, rural areas. I see no problem going to the Piney Woods or wherever we need to go, but we do need to get off the I-35 corridor.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
And I'd like to echo just making sure that you have in the trainings what it is for them to be qualified. And I invite you to come on October 25th, because we host an annual training here in Bexar County through our children's court. It's an ad litem training. And much of what is put in there is to meet the qualifications and the requirements. And we try to bring in experts in different fields to really kind of really get into it, like, experts in certain child injuries or child diseases or things of that nature. And so if you want something to maybe model it after, because it's a very successful one that we have a lot of attendance, and the point behind it is to obviously continue to reinvest in our current ad items, but also to deliver interest in it as well. So that might be a forum where you can kind of use as a think tank as well as you're developing this, and that's on October 25th.
Thank you, Judge Alvarado. I appreciate the invitation. I would love to join you. I also appreciate the language around investing and reinvesting in the attorneys on the docket, or the attorneys who could qualify to be on the docket. Thank you. Great ideas. The second question that we have for you is, do you all have any additional training topics that you would like to see the commission focus on in the upcoming fiscal year? We'd be happy to hear those from you and then take them into consideration.
Okay, I think we've left an adequate pause for feedback. Please continue to use the Q&A and write us. We want to hear from you. I know this is just a moment in time. We try to be responsive when training needs come up. So this is not a one-time offer. We're always interested in what you all would like to have training on throughout the state and locally. I think we'll round it off with Dylan, and then we'll go to Patrick, and then open it up for new projects as well. Dylan? Thanks, Melby.
Thank you, Jamie. Yeah, so I just wanted to update everyone on our data committee's efforts. Our data committee last met in April to discuss some of the ideas around data that we had generated at our previous meeting. And the first thing I want to say is I really want to thank the Office of Court Administration and their staff there about collaborating with us about trying to make sure that CPCMS really serves as both a case management tool and a data collection tool. One of the things we've kind of benefited from them of having them on the committee is our ideas about what we can do with CPCMS are often necessitate refinements from CPCMS. And they have been really receptive about trying to make sure that the data in CPCMS is robust, that it's reliable, and that it's accurate. And so it's been a good dynamic of working together with the Office of Court Administration to make CPCMS responsive both to the needs of judges, but also to the needs of data collection and measurement, because we've had some project ideas that relied on CPCMS, but there are refinements necessary before those ideas can go forward, and they've been very receptive to making sure that those refinements take place. Some other specific ideas regarding data that the committee was interested in is the connection between a child's placement in the CPS system and subsequent involvement in the juvenile system. And what we were able to do at our last meeting is sort of refine that idea and request and work with DFPS to see what data they had regarding that particular issue. They feel that they can be responsive to that data request. It is going to be somewhat limited in that it can't capture all juvenile justice involvement. It can only capture whether or not they were placed in a juvenile justice facility. But we're hopeful to get that data back soon and have an idea of what those connections might be. Another idea that was generated from the data committee was trying to examine the barriers to establishing permanency at 12 months. And this was really an idea that came out of the analysis of some of the CFSR data. And the idea behind it is that if you look at some of the CFSR data regarding permanency, there's permanency that's often achieved in just after 12 months, in month 13 or 14. And one of the major CFR benchmarks is permanency within 12 months. And so the idea was to try to examine what is it that's establishing permanency in 13 months rather than 12. What is it that is causing it to go sort of just over that marker? And what we've done to try to address that is we will be including that as part of our queries to judges in advance of the 2024 Child Welfare Judges Conference to try to get a judicial perspective of what might be the barriers that are causing that permanency to sort of be just outside of that marker. And so we're hopeful to get some good feedback from judges regarding that question. And I think hopefully that feedback from judges will help us be able to spur some ideas and projects and other things we might be able to do around collecting that issue. And I will say that the data committee is really still trying to find a focus of what they would like to really work on in FY 2025. So we've scheduled another data committee meeting in addition to our normal all-call meeting in September. We'll have a data committee meeting again in August to try to focus on those ideas. But we would really value ideas from the full Children's Commission as well of what projects can the data committee focus on. And there are sort of three major buckets that we'd really love to get feedback on. One is regarding a hearing quality project. That's one of our requirements to do a hearing quality project. And we'd love to get perspective on ideas for a specific hearing quality project or things that you think a hearing quality project should focus on. Another major point that we'd love to get feedback on is if there are data projects that you feel like you would like to see us focus on in FY 2025. And then the last one is, are there existing commission projects that you think should be more data driven, that we could do more with data to advance the goals of some of the things we're already doing? And I think, Dr. Blau's question regarding runaways is an excellent example of, are there efforts that we're currently working on that we want to make sure are more data informed? So I will open the floor to any questions or feedback or ideas that you all have. Judge Hoffman?
Yeah, and listening to everything we've talked about so far, it makes me think perhaps with the new legislative committee that you talked about earlier, incorporating specifics and targeting data requests to those legislative inquiries that we get and in legislation. I think when we write responses or white papers for legislation, I know the turnaround is quick, but if somehow we can incorporate data into those responses, especially since we have that new committee, it might be a good idea to brainstorm how they may work closely together.
Judge Hoffman, I think that's a great idea. It's definitely a challenge given the short turnaround time, but I think if we're proactive and we start thinking about that in advance about what the data needs might be and what we'd like to show, I think that's really, really critical to helping the legislature understand how our courts function and how the system works. So I really appreciate that idea.
Yeah, specifically with regards to that 18-month issue that you were just talking about and some proposed legislation that we're dealing with, I think there's an answer in there somewhere if we can figure out how to target it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Judge Hoffman. Does anyone else have any questions or ideas?
So just to piggyback also on Judge Hoffman's thoughts, particularly from before, and if there are data that you can bring to bear on the issue, this one, I think aging out or the young people that are transitioning from whether it's the child welfare system, into their own lives or where else. But it would be good to have those data. I think DFPS will have some of it, so it might be easier. It'd be good to coordinate around some of that, but it does seem like a particularly important arena that folks are interested in.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I think, when we talk about data informed, I always think that one of the best things about data is once you have data, it helps you understand what other data you want or need. And so I understand DFPS has a lot of data about that, but once you get the data that you do have, it really helps forward the discussion. Okay, this is what we've got. What else can we do? What else can we need? And how might we be able to get those things? So I really appreciate that. And that's exactly the kind we're thinking about when we think about how we can make our projects more data informed.
Well, thanks so much, Dylan, for providing the data committee report. And at this time, before we go to Patrick, I just want to open the floor to say, if you haven't heard of us working on it already, and you haven't heard us talk about it, something we might work on today, is there something else that we haven't spoken about that you think is really what we need to be focused on? A new project that's not even on our radar yet, that we want to make sure we're hitting the mark with the Children's Commission and the Court Improvement Program in Texas. So if there's something missing, a piece of the puzzle that we need to pay attention to, please chime in and let's have a little bit of dialogue about it. We have some time. Has anybody thought of something that hasn't been mentioned?
Jamie, I would just mention real quickly that nationally, and it's really more just an idea for us to begin thinking about instead of an actual project, but I'm hearing more focus on the time that a child is actually separated from their family and the damage that separation does, as opposed to reaching permanency or that sort of thing. And so I think you'll begin to hear that phrase used around the country. And that's something that we might begin thinking about here in Texas, is measuring some things in terms of the length of time that a child is separated from any sort of family.
Thank you for sharing that language, and that's something we should be on the lookout for and should be considering internally ourselves. Thank you, Judge Sage. Luann, I see your hands up as well.
Yes, just one of the things that I want to talk about, just and for us to think about in terms of data, is that oftentimes we think about data from a space of what is not working. And I would like for us to think about if the judges, if you are on the bench and you see situations where there are really positive outcomes that are happening for children who come to your court, I think we really want to know about that. And we want to know what happened for those young people that worked really well, and how can we replicate those good things that are happening that show positive outcomes in other areas of our state. So that's something that I really like for us to also think about. Thanks.
Thank you, Luann. I always appreciate your glass half full mindset. And I think it's a good reminder because we are often so focused on the crisis and the half empty part of the equation. And there's a lot of good work that can be scaled and replicated. And that's a great reminder to us all and something we can take back when we're framing our plans for next year. Thank you so much, Luann.
Jamie,
Anybody else?
Something?
I'm sorry, please.
I'm sorry, interrupt. I wanted to capitalize on Luann's comment by saying that we're actually putting together a panel on successful outcomes at this fall's Child Welfare Judges Conference. And I'm looking for any suggestions for parents and older youth who might be able to participate. So if you have any ideas, we've got room for more speakers and I'd love to hear from you. Thank you.
Great. I'm glad you mentioned that, Milbury. Thanks. Okay, anything else?
One thing I wanted to mention, Jamie, and I don't know how much you know about this, but the child protection law section is in the process of creating a foundation. And the purpose of that foundation is to, one of the primary purposes is to look at legislation in this area, because the section can't do that because of the lawsuits that are around now. And so I just think it's important that you all know that, and there may be some type of collaboration or something that could be involved. So just put that on your radar.
Thank you, Justice Lerman. The section has been such a great strength for our state and a great partner for the Children's Commission, and would be grateful to continue that conversation about that. Anything else before we move on to the financial report?
And let me clarify, the section is not creating the foundation.
The foundation, I'm
It's have to be
sorry.
two different things. So I misspoke. So just make sure that it's a separate entity.
No, I think I misspoke. You said that clearly. I apologize. Okay, Patrick, you're up for the financial report.
Thank you, Jamie. Good morning, everyone. While we don't typically discuss our budget at this forward-looking meeting, we wanted to make you all aware of an addition to the layout on the financial report, which you can find on page 49 of the report PDF. You'll notice a new section titled Other Income located there at the bottom of the report. For our purpose going forward, this section will include any funding that's anticipated or realized by the commission that's not federal CIP or appropriated by the Texas legislature. Now, currently, the only legislative appropriation that the commission receives is the cost of living adjustment that was approved last session for state agency employees. This new section includes the unearned revenue listed in the first column as contract amount, and then next, the realized or contract revenue. The columns are formatted in that way to represent the total amount that the commission could receive from these contracts. First in that list is the funding from KC Family Programs to conduct legal convenings on community-based care, family preservation, and CWAP. With this agreement, KC will contribute to the cost of conducting trainings at the contracted amount with a not to exceed of $40K. So thus far, the commission has received $30,000 from KC. I'd like to point out the reason that line has listed 2023, 2024, and you never saw it on our financial documents for 2023 is it's simply a difference in the two organizations' annual accounting periods. So while the $25,000 was in KC's fiscal year, accounting year 2023, it fell within the commission's fiscal year 2024, but we included both those years just for us and our KC partners that are on the calls. So in this contract, we have a $10K available that's available through December of 2024, which will then also fall within our fiscal year 2025. So depending on when this final training is completed, this line could carry forward to next year's budget. Next is the contract funding received from the department for the Texas Family First Pilot and Reasonable Efforts regional trainings that Amy discussed during her systems improvement update. This contract was executed in March of this year to conduct a total of 13 regional trainings by August 31st of 2025. And each of these are payable upon completion of each regional training conducted, the first being held in just a few weeks on June 3rd. So on the February report, the KC Family Programs funding was included in the top section, funds available, and listed at $25K. And at that time, we had realized that $25K. But since we met in February, KC graciously agreed to supplement the continued trainings with an additional $15,000, and then the department contract for TFF and Reasonable Efforts was executed. So to list these amounts in that first column of funds available would be misleading because they have not yet been realized and they're not available. But to not mention them at all in our financial report also felt misleading. So for now, this is where we're going to show these other incomes going forward. And that's all I have today for my update. Unless there's any questions, I'll pass it back to you, Jamie.
Anybody have any questions? We just wanted to be transparent about the various funding streams coming into the commission.
Okay, so are we ready now to hear from the department?
Yes, we are.
Okay. I'm always so happy to introduce people from the department because, as I say every time, I think that the department gets so much criticism and their job is so incredibly difficult. And While there's certain areas, of course, that need to always be given as much attention as possible, these professionals are really doing a really good job of dealing with a very, very difficult situation. And I'm certainly very appreciative of that. And so I would like to, at this time, invite Audrey O'Neill and Sasha Roscoe to give a report. And thank you both.
Good morning. This is Audrey. I'll go first and then I'll turn it over to Sasha. I'm going to share with you, I'm going to attempt to share my screen, a presentation about the efforts that we have done related to reducing our number of children without placement. Are you able to see that screen? Okay, great. Excellent. I see a thumbs up. So I, first of all, just want to thank you for the opportunity to come and discuss this very, very important topic with you. I think at our last meeting in person, I used the phrase relentless focus about 30 times when I talked to you about our efforts to reduce and eliminate children without placement. And I will tell you that it has truly been our relentless focus since that time. And we have really begun to see some really, really impressive improvement in this area. So in the interest of transparency, I wanted to really share as much data as I could with you to sort of show what has happened so far. And then I'm happy to take any questions that you have. Although I also learned last time this is a topic that begets a lot of questions, and I know we're trying to be finished at 11:30, so I'll try to move quickly to save time for your questions. So I am first just going to talk about, I don't think I shared this with you last time, and I will not go over this in detail, but this is our graphic that really demonstrates the systemic efforts that we began about 14 months ago in March 2023 to really reduce the number of children who were without placement. And I'll just be very brief and say that we really are focused on 4 areas. One is how we provide care when we do have to temporarily provide care for children because we do not have a placement for them. Another is ensuring that we have appropriate capacity in the system. And as you all know, particularly for our highest needs youth, this can be a real challenge for us. In this area, we are particularly focused on growing capacity in our qualified residential treatment center programs. We've implemented some step-down stabilization programs. And then an area where I hope to see us really, really continue to focus is increasing our capacity in treatment family foster care, because we know that children heal best when they're with families. In the services area, we continue to really focus on ensuring that we have a continuum of services available to serve youth who are at risk of becoming without placement, and really all children and youth with our highest level needs, which continues to be a real area of challenge, and I'll talk about a little bit later. And then finally, diverting youth from becoming without placement to begin with. And this is really ensuring that to the extent possible, number one, we want to keep children and youth out of the child welfare system whenever possible by meeting their needs outside of our system before they become at risk of entering our system. We do not want to build capacity that families have to come to our system to receive. We want to help ensure that that capacity is available in other systems, such as our health and human services systems, so that those families can get their needs met there and not come into our system. This slide just shows a little data, and you may have seen this. We've been using this handout for a while, but I did just want to show you a moment of sort of what does a child without placement look like. The top left quartile of this shows the number of children without placement over a period of time. That blue line represents the total number of children who experienced nights without placement over the month, and the orange line below that is the average daily census of children who met the definition of a child without placement. you all are probably aware, but for a very long time, that definition has been 2 consecutive nights without placement. As you can see at our height, for our average census, we were at about 191 children per night. I believe our highest daily night, which was, I think, July 31st of 2021, we were at about 204 children without placement. And as you can see, for the month of April, we ended that at about 19.7 children per night. And I'll share a little bit more about what those numbers are now in just a minute. In the next quartile, you see the some demographics related to age, and then the amount of time children had been in DFPS custody, which is about 31% of children who experienced any time without placement during the month of April 2024 had been in conservatorship for less than a year. And then finally, about 48% of those children, and I'm sorry, I said April, these percentages are for March. About 48% of those children had a removal reason of refusal to accept parental responsibility. And as you all are probably aware, that is a removal reason that we see when families are unable to meet the needs of children outside of our system and really reach a point of desperation where they relinquish their children to the department in order to access services.
So Audrey, excuse me, can I ask you, what is y'all's assessment of why that number was so high in 21 and what is different now?
Well, I, of course, was not at the department in 2021, but I think there were a lot of factors that contributed to this. So I'll just speak based on my sort of historic understanding. Certainly, we experienced a very dramatic reduction in capacity of the system in 20 and 21. I think we lost close to a third of the capacity during that period of time. And so that was a major driving factor. Also, after COVID, we started to see an increase in behavioral needs of children, and that contributed. So I think there were just a number of factors that sort of all happened at the same time. I will point out that we have not seen an increase in system capacity since that time. So the improvements that we're going to talk about are not really because we have added capacity overall. However, we have worked to add some very specific capacity. Judge Munch, did you have a question?
Yes, I did have a question, but I'm not a judge. So I just did want to ask regarding that drop in capacity that you mentioned. Was that a drop in capacity across the board, or was that drop in capacity regarding any specific placement type?
It was a drop in capacity across the board, but we did see it sort of disproportionately impact the capacity that we might have used for youth with our highest needs. For example, RTC capacity decreased significantly during that time period. But in general, we lost a lot of capacity during that time period. And I do want to say, we lost some facilities during that time period. Again, I was not here, but we lost facilities that it's my understanding really needed to close. So it is not necessarily an entirely negative thing that we lost some of that capacity. However, we do have to figure out how to replace that capacity with high quality capacity around the state. In the bottom left quartile, you just see, you've probably heard these things from us before, the needs and characteristics of children who are experiencing gaps in placement remain the same. This has been pretty consistent throughout, where physical aggression, a history of psychiatric hospitalization, runaway behaviors, involvement in the juvenile justice system are always the top 4 behavior characteristics that we see for children who experience gaps in placement. And as we have had success at finding placement for more and more youth with complex needs. We're seeing these numbers creep up just a little bit more, which, you know, there's not much further north that they can go. But as we get the population smaller, almost every child and youth left that experiences time without placement, with a few rare exceptions, have these characteristics and needs. Really, the time that you see a child that does not have a characteristic and need that is listed up here is when there is an initial removal, and for some reason we do not have placement the moment that child is removed, and they have to wait a couple of days maybe to go to a kinship setting or something like that. And then finally, the bottom right quartile here is just demonstrating that one thing we have learned is that if we can get a child or youth with complex needs in placement and keep them in that placement for at least 30 days, they are much less likely to return to DFPS supervision, and we are much more likely to see them stabilize in that placement. And that has really been a driving factor for some of our efforts over the last couple of months, which have really involved around supporting youth in placements when they get there through our physical presence, and really helping caregivers meet the needs of children with complex needs to keep them in those placements. This slide I'm sorry, I want to go back for 1 second. One thing I didn't put up here, but I did just want to discuss very briefly, is sort of how children come into being without placement. What their setting was before they came into being without placement, because that's a question we get asked sometimes. The biggest drivers of that are children and youth who are coming from a juvenile detention setting and coming from a psychiatric hospital. And that is both, those are the most likely circumstances where we will see a child enter our system for the first time through a wrapper status, where a parent will not pick them up from a psychiatric hospital or will not pick them up from juvenile detention. But also if they're in our system and they continue to experience psychiatric hospitalization, for example, those are the children that even once they're in our system, it's the most difficult for us to find placement for. So we also do see some children enter Child Watch because of a placement breakdown with a fictive kin or a foster home, but we're really working hard to prevent and reduce those, particularly with these new efforts. So this slide just shows a census overall. So you have a sense of sort of what the children in our care, what settings they're in, generally speaking. This is as of April 30th. And as you can see, we had 16,372 children in our care at that time. Of those, just about 85% of them are in some kind of kinship care, adoptive home, or foster home. The remaining about 25% of them are in some sort of other care setting, such as a residential treatment center or an emergency shelter, for example, where they're getting another level of services. As of the end of April, you can see that we had 22 children, or 0.1% of children in the system, who did not currently at that time have a placement. So this really shows the efforts that the department has made that have really been successful in just the last couple of months. At the beginning of March, we were averaging about 58 children per night. We actually had 58 children, I think, on March the 1st, who were without placement. And then this shows really just every Friday since that time period, up through May 3rd. I haven't yet put the new data in. And as you can see, we really saw a dramatic decline in the month of March. And what I'll say about April and May is, historically, this is really when we've seen an increase in the number of children and youth without placement. That has to do with a lot of factors, but one factor is that we tend to see lots and lots of discharges as the end of the school year approaches. And that has been really challenging for us for our highest need youth. So I pulled some numbers that I thought were just really telling. On May 14th, 2023, so 1 year ago, earlier this week, we had 103 children and youth who were without placement. On May 14th, 2024, we had a total of 17 kids across the state who were without placement. And that is really due to the strategic system-wide efforts that we began 14 months ago, due to an individual focus on intensive child needs that I'll focus on, and due to some interagency collaboration. I do also want to share that, what we really know at the department is children do not do well in hotels, and we are really focused on ending that. Unfortunately, what we've also learned is that leased homes, we've tried a number of things. Those are worse than hotels for children with these behavioral needs. We ended our last leases in May. So at this point, the 22 children across the state are not in any sort of leased home setting. So I thought you would probably want to know where children are going when we get them placement. I expected you might have a lot of questions about this. So I have two different types of data to share with you on that. And I apologize. I know this can be a little overwhelming, but I didn't feel comfortable putting an other up here because I thought if I were you, I would have a lot of questions about what that other meant and where those children were going. So I stuck with a pretty descriptive level of detail to make sure that there was complete transparency around our data. And these are placements that we made for a total of 160 youth who had some time in a without placement status between March 9th, when we really started tracking this data as we redoubled our efforts, and May the 7th. And as you can see, about 25% of children and youth are going to a foster home. Some of those, or a significant number of those, are through child-specific contracts or in treatment family foster care foster homes to really help those families meet the high needs of youth who we are placing. About 23% of them went to residential treatment centers. About 21% went to an emergency shelter. And I do want to just point out, I'm going to show you in just a moment their most current placement, so you can see sort of how this changed over time. But one thing we are doing is working to get children into emergency placements and then move them out of those emergency shelters as quickly as possible, which sounds like the definition of an emergency shelter to me. We want those children to be in those settings for the shortest amount of time possible so that we can get them into a setting where they're more likely to either get their therapeutic needs met or achieve positive permanency. There are a number of children who have also gone to kinship or fictive kinship homes. For example, we have a great story in Austin of a youth who had been without placement for, I think, about 240 days. And the really, truly outstanding and exhaustive efforts of our team, we were able to find a teacher at his local high school who was willing to accept him as a fictive kinship placement. And we were able to keep this youth connected to his local community. He has a church that he's really connected to, and in his school. So those are really the kinds of placements we are working very hard to make through this initiative. And then a few, three, as you'll see on here, older children who were returned to a parental home, either a non-custodial parent or a parent, in some cases even who had rights terminated, but had really demonstrated a change in behavior. And a lot of these children are very, very close to aging out of care. So now I want to show you their current placements. And as you can see, there's a lot more slices, but again, I just felt like it was really important to be as transparent with this data as possible. So I included every single one of them on here, even the ones that are one. And you see that the emergency shelter piece of the pie is smaller, which is what we want to see happening, because we want to move those kids out of emergency shelters into more permanent settings as quickly as possible. We have had some foster home placements that were not successful, even with the department working really hard to support the needs of those foster families. And that is something we are really continuing to work on. And I mean, really, truly being present for those foster families. We'd rather transport kids to appointments, physically help a foster parent by providing some relief than have a child without placement. We're also using a lot of that support in our kinship and fictive kinship settings. And as you can see, I'll just go back real quick so you can see that number has stayed exactly steady at 15. So we're really excited to see that. The parents' home on this part of this pie is a little bit misleading because it includes, I think, 6 or 7 children who the department did not yet have TMC of, and they were returned home at or before the adversary hearing. So that's why that slice of the pie is a little bit thicker. So this is where kids are as of May 7th, and we are going to continue to track that as part of our efforts to really understand what is driving our success here and also what is not working so that we can make adjustments. So just speaking very briefly about what we think the drivers of that success are. Again, a lot of it is system-wide collaborative strategic efforts. We've done some things to streamline our placement process and centralize our placement process. We are working to expand targeted capacity. For example, at this time last year, we did not, I do not believe the QRTPs didn't come online, I think, until July of 2023. So we did not yet have that capacity, I believe. And a wide range of efforts like that. We are really, really focused on the individual child. And I will tell you, this is really where we have seen this success is daily. We are staffing every single child who is currently without placement and every single child who is at risk of being without placement. And all levels of our staff at this organization, myself included, are involved in those staffings as we work to troubleshoot the needs for each individual child, because we know that each child is different and what works for one child is not going to necessarily work for another child. And then finally, and really critically, interagency collaboration. We are working very, very closely with partners across the juvenile justice system, and most significantly at Health and Human Services, to really look at critically at how can we meet the complex behavioral and mental health needs of children who we see typically who become without placement. And those efforts have really resulted in us being able to provide wraparound services to help providers accept children and to help us keep those placements stable so that children can really heal in the long term. I do think it's really important to acknowledge there are still major, major barriers that we are working to address. One of those behaviors, and I'm sure this is not a surprise to anyone here, is simply that the landscape has really changed in the last 10 years, and we are seeing children and youth with a level of behavioral and mental health needs in more significant numbers than we ever have before. And we realize that we really have to think differently about what services and supports as a state we need to meet the needs of those youth. Again, number one, to prevent them from entering our system to begin with, if at all possible. We do not want families to have to come to our system to get mental and behavioral health care. And then secondly, to meet the needs of youth in our care who do have these very, very serious needs. And then secondly, significant limitations on capacity for certain types of placements with youth with high needs. So for example, we still have a limited number of QRTP placements across the state, and we have a high demand for those services. We need more treatment family foster care beds to ensure that children and youth can be with a foster family and living in a family setting that's still getting the level of therapeutic support and wraparound services that they need. So that concludes what I wanted to share with you. I'm happy to answer questions you have, but I also want to be mindful that I know Sasha has a presentation.
Okay, so Sasha Roscoe.
Last few months of transitioning to HHSC and becoming the family support division over there. I think the thing that's really notable for this group is that while it's still sad to disconnect from child welfare, sort of at least in an agency home perspective, it is really broadening the opportunities for HHSC to address the family's needs beyond the parenting programs we run. And they are working on sort of a family health roadmap and creating an integrated continuum of care with a family perspective for all the services HHSC provides. So really, kind of as Audrey mentioned, sort of how are families stabilizing earlier so that they can avoid child welfare involvement through other services like, WIC or Medicaid or behavioral health support, substance use treatment. So there's a lot of potential opportunity, and happy to keep you all posted as we move over there, and HHSC really broadens that lens. We are also busy expanding. I know I've reported earlier that the legislature is very generous with a significant expansion for prevention programmings. We've added 17 home visiting sites already. We are in the process of evaluating proposals for a lot more expansion opportunities, including more family resource centers. We partner with the Alliance of Child and Family Services to support those family resource centers. And you all did ask, I think, in a previous meeting, if there was a way to search for or get a list of the family resource centers we're funding. I think the Alliance and the department jumped on that. So we both have search mechanisms, depending on where you want to go, either to the Alliance's websites or the PEI page on the DFPS website has a search by county feature, so you can find family resource centers perhaps in your area if you're wanting to connect families to those. And the last thing I just wanted to share is that I've been on my own sort of tour of our prevention programs around the state, and I've sat in on 2 kinship navigation support groups. I know you heard from one of our kinship navigation providers, our ACH Kinship Navigation Program in Tarrant County a few meetings ago. I sat in on our Kinship Navigation Program that Catholic Charities runs in Lubbock and that New Horizons runs in Abilene. And I mean, they're very moving. And one of the issues we're hearing a lot about, and remember, this is not just kinship providers that are formally connected with child welfare, but also those who, prior to any involvement or, in fact, preventing any need for involvement, have stepped in. And perhaps it was just that the parent of the child was incarcerated or dealing with substance issues, and CPS didn't need to step in order to secure this kinship arrangement. But the kinship providers still have the same need to have support and navigate various services as the non-legal custodian of their kiddo. And that is one of the predominant themes we've heard, is just the number of kinship providers really struggling with those legal aspects of being a non-custodian parent. And well, they are the custodial parent actually, but they're just often don't have the legal guardianship or connection to the child that they're taking care of. And again, that is kind of regardless of child welfare involvement. I mean, sometimes these are cases that have been closed out and maybe CPS had some initial contact, but also in cases in which there has been no CPS investigation. Families are often just sort of, they've taken the kiddo and that's kind of where they are. They don't really have what they need to access mental health services or sign children up for school. And so what these navigation programs have been doing is navigating to a lot of free and or financially supporting legal resources, which was a surprise to us. It's not really what we thought a predominant source of kinship support would be, but just to report that has been kind of a big theme. And then just, I guess my own kind of, not aha, but just sort of takeaway too, was the amount of kind of generational trauma in these families, and how much the kinship providers themselves have been, have their own history and come to being a kinship provider with a lot of their own issues. Which makes it even really, I think, more commendable what they're stepping up to do in many cases. A lot of them have been homeless, had their own substance use struggles, and they're really stepping in and sort of healing alongside these kids. So it was very profound. It's and we are watching the federal funding for this program and kind of developing some contingency plans to either maintain and then hopefully expand that support in the future. That's kind of my report for today, so you guys can stay on time.
Well, terrific. Thank you for that. We are just a couple of minutes ahead of time. If there are any questions or follow-up onto that. Thank you, Sasha. It's a great report. Okay, I don't see any. So what I'd like to do next, I've seen Megan on the screen here. So welcome to Megan Lavoie, who is taking some time out of her busy schedule to give us an update from OCA. So good morning, Megan. You have the floor.
Good morning. Thank you, Justice Huddle. I have just a brief, it's only 3 slides, very short, but I want to share some data that we've been working on that we pulled from the CPCMS case management system. As y'all know, we've been actively working on, we have a grant from the commission to improve the data collection and quality that is in CPCMS. We are hopeful to do an annual report, but I think I shared a little bit of that data at the last meeting. And so I wanted to elaborate on that just a little bit, but it's very short. So I'm going to try to share my screen. Let me know if y'all can see that. Yes. Okay, perfect. Okay, so this is CPCMS highlights for the last 12 months from May of 2023 through April of 2024. So you can see in the system, we show that there are just over 4,000 cases filed. And about 4,600 cases closed with a clearance rate of 115%, which is good. August of 2023 had the most cases filed in the last 12 months with 413 cases. Of those cases, 52 were adoption. You can see we have it broken out by adoption, conservatorship, and non-conservatorship cases. November of 2023 had the most cases closed in the last 12 months with 501 cases. Of those 501 cases, 94 of them were adoption. And then this is, I think, something really important to highlight is the clearance rate. So in the past 12 months, all but 3 of those months had a clearance rate over 100%. And obviously 100% is the goal. So doing well there as well. So that was really short, like I promised. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Okay. All right, so I have some other brief highlights and to go over with y'all. Legislative interim charges have come out, and There are a couple that I want to bring to your attention, specifically on the House side. So in the Juvenile Justice and Family Issues Committee, they do have an interim charge on best interest of a child. The charge specifically says, examine the Texas Family Code definition of best interest of a child used in determining issues of conservatorship of and access to a child, determine whether policy changes can better protect the rights and interest of children and parents. They also have an overarching charge on studying juvenile justice system outcomes. Public Health has a interim charge to look at emergency detention. And then I know last meeting we talked about artificial intelligence. The Senate does have an artificial intelligence charge that is in the Business and Commerce Committee. They've also created a joint committee that was the result of a bill last session, and they have met at least once and brought some agencies before the committee to discuss kind of some of the things that agencies are doing with artificial intelligence. So I know there's a lot of groups within the judiciary that are working on artificial intelligence and recommendations. I know the Judicial Council and the bar. And so we are definitely following that closely. You know, I see Judge Ferguson. I know he just gave a big presentation at the regional judicial conferences with our IT director, Casey Kennedy. So lots of discussion, not only here in Texas, but at the national level happening around there, around that issue. A couple other updates that I want to let you know about is we are in the process of hiring a new children's court program manager. So that was the position that used to be held by Anissa Johnson. And as you probably know, Anissa, not only did she work with our children's courts and our child support courts, but she also worked with the specialty courts, the drug courts, DWI courts across the state. So a really big job for just one person. We have since split that up. And so we have hired somebody that is going to work specifically with the specialty courts across the state. She actually just started, Erin Morgan, a couple of weeks ago. And so this new position will solely just be working with our child protection and child support courts. So I think they'll be able to provide even better service than we have provided before. And I believe the interviews for that position are being done next week. And we have several great candidates. So I'm very excited about that. I think every time I talk with y'all, I always update you on our work in data. So we are slowly moving to collecting case level data. We had an RFO go out for a new case level data system. Those responses were due last week. So we're currently in the evaluation period. We're hoping to have a contract signed with a vendor sometime a little bit later this year. So we're excited that that project is moving forward. We're also working on a text reminder system. That RFO is out for bid right now. The responses for that are due on May 31st. So lots of active procurements going on. One last procurement that we have is for a workload study for court staff. I think I've mentioned this before, similar to the workload study that we have done to determine where new courts need to be created. The legislature put a rider in our budget last session to look at the need for court staff across the state. And so we have contracted with PPRI to do that study. I actually got a call yesterday from one of our bigger counties asking, PPRI did a public information request asking for a list of all of their court staff and their salaries, which is a requirement of the bill. So if you see a request come to your jurisdiction like that, do not be alarmed. They want to make sure that it was legit. So we're working with A&M to improve their communication so jurisdictions don't think it's some random request, but that is a request from that study. And then lastly, another big thing that or two things. The Judicial Compensation Commission met this week to begin their work on making a recommendation for the appropriate amount for judicial salaries. And one thing that I thought was very interesting is we always have an inflation chart that we put in our materials, and the base salary for a district judge needs to go up 30% by 2026 just to keep up with inflation. The commission just looked at data at this meeting that they had on Wednesday. Later this summer, they will have another meeting and they will have a public hearing to get testimony from judges and prosecutors and the public and others that are interested in that topic. So I'll keep the commission updated on that. And then lastly, we are just in the beginning stages of working on our legislative appropriation request. All of the OCA directors are meeting starting Sunday through Tuesday to look at all the projects that impact the judiciary to formalize that request, which is due at the beginning of August. So that's my brief report. Happy to answer any questions that y'all have. Well, thanks so much for having me, and always appreciate y'all's work, and always available via email, phone, if there's anything that y'all need.
Thank you, Megan. Thanks for the great work that y'all do over there. We really do appreciate it very, very much.
Of course.
Okay, so now then, we had given our collaborative council members an opportunity to submit some written materials and make some verbal updates today. So those written materials are behind tab 5 in the meeting notebook or on page 53 of the PDF. And so the members who submitted their requests have a couple of minutes to visit with us today. And so let's start with Sarah Bryant, who is with Texas Legal Services Center Family Helpline. Sarah.
Thank you, Justice Lehrman. So yes, my name is Sarah Bryant. I'm an attorney with Texas Legal Services Center. And I wanted to take this opportunity just to spread the word about our new KinCare Legal Services program, which has been up and running for about 3 months now due to generous funding from the Texas Access to Justice Foundation. So I love that Sasha briefly touched on these issues earlier, and I'm really happy to say that we're fully plugged in with the Kinship Navigator programs funded by PEI, and we've really enjoyed collaborating with them. But unfortunately, these programs are not available everywhere in the state. So our legal assistance program is a statewide program. Right now, we've got 1 full-time attorney and 1 part-time attorney. And this program really just grew out of our family helpline program because we were getting such a large number of calls from relatives who had questions about how to provide stability for the kids in their care, trying to better understand what their rights were as a caregiver, and just trying to understand their role in DFPS proceedings. So one common issue we were seeing quite a bit of is where the children were being left with relatives informally through a safety plan or a PCSP, or possibly with no documentation at all. And then if DFPS closes that case out because they feel the child is safe, the caregiver has no legal rights to the child, and that can become a problem at some point. We also see those situations where DFPS has removed the child from the parents, and there is a court involved, but if the relative is either placement or maybe they want to be placement, but they're not entitled to any sort of free legal counsel, and they're often just really lost and they're not sure what their legal options are, yet they're asked to be making these really major legal decisions, such as, do you want permanent managing conservatorship of this child till they turn 18? And then we also see a lot of cases where the child is living with a kinship caregiver not due to CPS, but like Sasha mentioned, because a parent has passed away, a parent became incarcerated, or the child was just left in the home by agreement. So this can create a lot of instability for the child, particularly if there's no parent around to sign paperwork to give permission to the caregiver to take steps to care for the child. So with that being said, some of the issues that we're really looking to target with this new program are helping families access government benefits like Medicaid and CHIP, and also doing appeals for denials of benefits, helping to ensure that the kids are getting enrolled in school, making sure they're receiving all of the benefits that they're entitled to, whether that's through special education or under the McKinney-Vento Act if the child is considered to be homeless, helping with navigating Social Security issues, particularly if a parent's deceased or if the child has a disability, making sure the kids have identification documents, because that can be a major barrier to certain things, making sure the caregivers can consent to medical treatment, because this often is not a problem until it's a really serious problem. If the court is involved, then we can give legal advice to caregivers about long-term decision-making, making sure that they understand what financial benefits might be available to them and how to access those. And then for those cases where the relative wants legal conservatorship of the child outside of the CPS court, we are able to provide limited scope representation in the form of advice and counsel and drafting documents. So right now we're prioritizing cases that are either agreed with the parents or that are expected to default. Because we are statewide and we don't have a huge travel budget, we're not able to take on those highly contested cases where the relative really needs full legal representation, but we'll certainly do our best to refer those out whenever we can. So yeah, we're just really excited to see how this program goes, see what kind of cases are coming in, and help us all better understand the legal needs of these kinship families. There is a flyer for our program included in your packet. It has our contact information on there, and you're welcome to reach out if you have any questions just generally about the program, or if you want to refer anyone over to us. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that great update, and thanks for that important work you're doing. We really appreciate it very much. Thanks for letting us know about it. And we have also Barbara Elias Percival with Texas Lawyers for Children. And thank you for being with us today, Barbara.
Thank you, Justice Lehrman. I would like to talk with you about the primary focus that Texas Lawyers for Children has right now, which is training on trauma issues. And that's because research shows that all children who have come into the foster care system have experienced multiple forms of trauma, including the trauma of being removed from their home. And so that's why our current focus is on that. And there has been a lot of discussion today about children with very high needs for mental health services and behavioral health services. And so that is also why we are focusing on this topic. And so, as many of you know, we have developed a 15-hour legal professional trauma training course for judges and attorneys. It's available on our online legal resource center at texaslawyersforchildren.org and our trauma training portal. And that is 15 hours of family violence CJE credit for judges and MCLE credit for attorneys. And we had great feedback from that program that's been out for quite a while now. And in the feedback, when we've asked people, the judges and attorneys who've taken that 15-hour course, what would you like to see next? The overwhelming response was, we want to hear from the mental health experts about how to really focus on the children's mental health needs and to heal their trauma, because trauma affects the biology, as we know, the biology, the brain functioning, the emotional functioning, and especially the behavior of children. And so we have been adding programs from some outstanding mental health professionals from across the country over the last year. And those are now in the trauma training portal. And there is a flyer about how to register that's after tab 5, as Justice Lehrman has mentioned. And so I want to just highlight, and on this flyer, we're just highlighting 2 of the mental health programs that are in the trauma training portal. One is on EMDR, a game changer for traumatized children. And this webinar has speakers who are the 2 for 2023 and 2022, the national award, actually international award-winning practitioners of EMDR internationally, Dr. Deborah Korn and Ms. Ana Gomez. And then there is also a speaker who, Michael Baldwin, who successfully was treated with EMDR for childhood trauma. And there is also a case study. The case study will only be available September 28th. That's why the flyer encourages you to watch this before September 28th. But this webinar really explores why EMDR works and shows how it works, and shows with the case study it happening in process. EMDR is eye movement desensitization reprocessing, and it is an evidence-based form of trauma therapy that goes beyond the logic brain and into the emotional right brain, and that's why it's so effective in healing trauma. And we've heard so much today about children with really high needs and complex needs, and there is so much success with EMDR that I think it would be very, very powerful for you to watch that program. And then also another one I want to highlight is by Ms. Ana Gomez, who has over 30 years of experience treating children in the foster care system. It's called Navigating Intricacies in Healing Child Complex Trauma from a Clinical Perspective. And she does, and these are more advanced training programs, she does a very deep dive into how trauma, complex trauma, impacts children's brain and biology and emotional system and behavior, and what it takes to repair those systems, to actually repair them. Her success stories are amazing on what the different types of trauma-based therapy can do for children with these types of needs. And very, very encouraging work. And this is the type of therapy that can really, really heal children. There are other mental health and advanced trauma programs within the training portal that are beyond the 15-hour course. So I'll let you go there. The registration link is in the flyer as well, how to register. So thank you so much for the time today to let you know about these advanced mental health programs.
Thank you, Barbara. I know you've done so much for so many children over these many years. So thank you very much for that, and always keeping us informed on your great new programs. Thank you.
Thank you.
So it looks like we're ending right on time. Thank you all so much for participating, but more importantly for what you do on the ground, helping these families on a day-to-day basis. Justice Huddle and I in the court certainly do appreciate you all very, very much. So we kind of don't have much time for new business. Does anybody have anything you need to say real quickly? Okay, so remember our next meeting is in person, yay, and that will be on September 13th. We will get you the details of exactly where that will be as soon as we can figure that out. And then the meeting after that on November 15th will be another virtual meeting. We try to have 4 meetings every month now in accordance with our responsibilities to do so. So thank you again very much. Good luck to everybody in Houston. My son has been sending me pictures and it looks horrible. I know Justice Huddle is one who's going to have to tear through the muddle, so I'm sorry, and to everybody else who's having to deal with that, and good luck to you, and thank you all, and look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you all.